I was in a collective that was called Coom Transmissions with Genesis Peerage and Cozy Fanny Tutti, and we were doing performance art in galleries and...
Wasn't Chris in it too?
No. And travelling around doing performances, conceptual art performances in different places. And we were becoming very frustrated that the fine art world was very narrow, and it was only addressing certain kind of people that went to art galleries and not to young people generally, and not to the public at large. And so we decided to start making art pieces that were in the form of music, and to take some of the styles and some of the genres of rock, but to make sounds that were totally unlike that, and sounds that interested us in a subconscious way rather than in a musical way. None of us could play instruments. This was about a year before the beginning of punk, and we started really the notion that it was possible to be successful musically without knowing how to play your instruments. It's just that we never tried, whereas the punk groups tried to play three chords and tried to ape the conventions of the Ramones and people like that. And so it seemed to us that we started at the same time, but what we were doing was pure. What they were doing was tainted and was
retrogressive.
Retrogressive, exactly.
Just dressed in new clothes, really.
And we called our label Industrial Records, and consequence of that was really to start the industrial genre altogether, which was music that supposedly related to the urban landscape and used sounds from the sounds of industry and the sounds of machines and the sounds in the same way that the futurists had done in the 20s and 30s, but for a new audience.
I mean, I was as a fan at whatever age I was, like 14 or 15, to hear Throbbing Gristle for the first time. It was, I'd heard the Damned, I'd heard the Clash, and I just thought they were rock crap. I was never ever interested in rock and roll. And Throbbing Gristle, although they used guitars and bass and originally drums, but the whole aesthetic of it was to reflected the way my life was. I looked out the window and I lived on really boring estates and RAF council, blocks, and what they were putting into their music, lyrically and sound-wise, was so relevant to me that it blew punk out the window. It really did. And Peter invented the word, industrial. He said industrial music for industrial people. And there was a sort of echo of the Warhol Factory, wasn't there, for Jen in that, the music from the Death Factory and stuff. But they were confronting issues that none of the other bands were doing. The other bands were, being dressed by Jasper Conran, the clothes designer. The Clash were, and it was all clothes orientated in the London scene, and it was horrific. And then Throbbing Gristle came along, and they were talking northern slang and used Throbbing Gristle as the northern slang expression, and just talking, using sounds that I could relate to as a disaffected youth. I sort of dressed as a punk, but I listened to Throbbing Gristle and I listened to Per Ubu, who I sort of had a sort of slight thing on the Residents, but Throbbing Gristle, but totally the one that really hit home for me. And from then on, I vowed to follow a similar course, and I connected it with William Burroughs, and I connected it with sort of Kurt Schwitters and Marcel Duchamp and all the books, the few small books in the library at school. And I saw a connection between these things, that it was an art phenomena, but it was an art that you lived rather than that their life was art and art was life. There wasn't a difference, and that really struck me very strongly and still does now, and this is what I hope we are doing now. Cabaret Voltaire and Clock Devier became industrial because of their connections through Throbbing Gristle. Cabaret Voltaire, if you strip it down, they were like they're the seeds.
The aspects of our use of synthesizers that Chris Carter did, had reference to Kraftwerk, obviously,
or Tangerine Dream,
but those are basically the main two. But the way that we used them was different because we weren't attempting to make pop music. We were attempting to reach a far deeper current, and nobody really in the contemporary music, so-called pop music culture, used tapes or sampling.
It was so subversive and it was only 10 years later that the journalists and the majority of the people understood how subversive that Throbbing Gristle really were, and not just in ideas but in the sound. When they were being ironic, there was more than one level of irony, and I picked up on that.
The thing that was exciting for us at the time was that it seemed like it was going to be possible to plug into a circuit or a current of kind of disaffected youth and appeal to them in a way that was sort of pure and artistic without incurring any negative connotations of going to art galleries or education or any kind of culture that they might find they might relate to older people and to things that had nothing to do with them. And so what we were hoping for was to appeal to people directly and bypass the whole kind of cultural system. And I think that to some extent that worked, obviously in small
And strangely enough, a lot of the media backlash you had at the time was that you were all art school people. That you'd all been to art school, which was complete nonsense, whereas most of the punk groups had all been to art school.
Yeah, the reverse is actually true. None of us had ever had any art education, really, was.
That just shows how clever that Throbbing Gristle's camouflage actually was.
You gotta get some persuasion. You gotta get some look at me, I touch your breath. Look at me, I touch your knees, and I persuade you. Like always, I persuade you. Like always, I persuade you. Persuasion. Look at me, I touch your head. I say a word, you go to bed. My sister and my mother, my father, my son, do everything I want them to. With one lot of persuasion. Like always, persuasion. Now there's lots of ways to persuade you. I could do it with money, I could look at you, I could show you all that, you might as well do it anyway. You might as well choose to play the game. After all, you've seen yourself before. What difference does it make? What difference if I take photograph? What difference does it make if someone else sees it too? Oh, all your friends do it. I mean, no one knows you. Anybody. It could be anybody. I mean, those magazines, you know, they only go to middle-aged men. So why don't you just do what I suggest? I persuade you with words. I persuade you. Persuasion. I got a little biscuit tin to keep your panties in. I've got a little biscuit tin to keep your panties in. Soiled panties, white panties, school panties, white rug panties, by the canal. By the canal. I persuade you, like always, I persuade you. Look at me, look at me. There's a certain word, a certain touch, a certain way, and a way too much. There's a little bit here and a little bit there, and when you got it all, it's too late to care. So I persuade you, like always, I persuade you. Look in my eye, under your covers I touch you, and what to do. Do it because I tell you. Do it because I love you. And I persuade you. Persuasion.